Western ears, this can be a little frightening, like, but my goals define me, like I gotta have the things I'm shooting for. And yeah, they are functional and useful to a certain degree, but the Taoists would argue that when you deflate your ego enough that you can connect with the Tao, then you will start to naturally harmonize with the same flow that powers the rising and setting of the sun and the changing of the seasons and the birth and death of humans and the growth of an embryo and all that unseen force behind all those things. It has your interest at heart. It wants to grow you like a garden. But if we go in and we're like, but I need to go this way because I really want to do it, then we start to get off the path and get out of balance, and then we overcome it, and it's this fight against this natural flow. So if we can let go of the fight, and that's what the Wu Wei is like, we let go of what we think the purpose is, and we embrace this idea that like, all right, the Tao's taking me somewhere that's good. It's going to give my life meaning and purpose, and it's going to allow me to be helpful to others in a unique way if I just let go and I trust it and I go with that flow. And so it is active. It's not lethargy on the couch, right? This surrender is not it's not stagnant, right? Because that still counts as an action. That's actively not doing anything, and this also would not be healthy. So like a classical description of the state of Wu Wei that is really helpful is they say that when you're in Wu Wei, you don't do anything, but nothing gets left undone.
If you're trying to live a more self-led life, alcohol-free as fuck, and you find yourself stuck in your head a lot, ungrounded in your body, and have an internal war going on with yourself, then this episode is for you. Today, I am speaking with Thad Wong, a 5-degree black belt, senior Qigong instructor, and longtime practitioner of the internal martial arts. But Thad's real superpower, he helps people return home to themselves. Thad got sober in 2019 through the spiritual path of the 12 steps, and he spent the years since helping others build lives that are not just alcohol-free, but powerful, peaceful, and deeply integrated. This is a conversation about healing from the inside out, about how martial arts, sobriety, and spirituality converge, not to make you tougher, but to make you whole. So if you've ever wondered how to get out of your head, into your body, and back to your true nature, this episode is for you. So without further ado, I will shut the hell up and leave you in the capable hands of the incredible Thad Wong. Let's start at the beginning, bro. Before you became a teacher and healer that you are today, how did alcohol first show up on your radar? What's your earliest memories and thoughts and feelings around it, I guess?
Yeah, so actually probably my first relationship with alcohol was one of avoidance, I'd say. So I started training Chinese martial arts in high school. And the teachers that I first started training with were very kind of anti-alcohol, So I sort of avoided it for a lot of the period when a lot of my friends were trying it. But then after I got to college, I was like, well, I'm in college, right? I might as well give it a go, and did, and it was fine for me at first. It was just like standard as everyone else. I'd do it when there'd be parties and things like that, and it wasn't a regular thing or anything like that. So I had sort of the slow development of alcohol creeping into my life over a long time. But yeah, that was
now you've had time to reflect. What were you chasing or numbing back then, do you think?
It's a great question. I think basically it boils down to a sense of being separate and not good enough, and that could be, it could show up in all different kinds of ways. But I think that ultimately that if I had to just sum it up into one thing, it's I'm all alone and I am insufficient being all alone. And I'm afraid everyone's going to find out, and alcohol and drugs a little bit. Marijuana is kind of part of my story too. So at the peak of my use, it was very much both kind of always traveled together. And I would toggle between saying like, oh, well, maybe I could just give up the weed and just drink, or maybe I could just drink and give up the weed, and then never worked, trying to find that formula to include either in my life was just an impossible and torturous task. So yeah, then, it was really in having to give those things up and look at what was I covering up with those things, and why did it become so necessary, that really revealed that over time, so I've been sober about 6.5 years, and it's taken time to reveal those things. To some degree it goes clearer.
Was there a particular moment when you realized that alcohol was actually it wasn't doing what it said it was supposed to do on the tin? Like, when was your wake up moment?
Yeah. Mine was well before I got sober to some degree. Um, before I successfully got sober. So I well, I mean, I knew it was a problem, I guess, because I did sort of 6 months just on my own, white knuckling it, just trying to just abstain and do, and not have any kind of community to do it with, or any necessarily formal method. I mean, I was in therapy and on antidepressants at the time, so I had some professional help, but in retrospect, I was suffering from all the pain I was trying to hide with no solution to it. And I'd say, that I don't know if it was necessarily a distinct thing, but already by the time I took a break, it was clear to me that it was a problem, and that was being reflected back to me by the people around me. I mean, the thing that probably led to it was moving in with the woman who's now my wife. So we'd been dating in New York. We moved in together, and I could no longer hide my use as well as I was before. And it was really, I think, a series of like me saying wasn't going to drink, intending to not drink, and then, I drink a little bit, and then I'd head out to the bars, and black out, not remember how I got home. I mean, I had a pretty intense relationship with it at the end. So frankly, unfortunately, I was a bit of a slow learner. It took a series of those to even get me to attempt to stop. And then for me, that 6 months of having been stopped on my own became its own off ramp. It was because I was like, oh, I've done it for 6 months now. I've got it out of my system. I'm cured. I'm good. I'm sure I could control it this time. And we went to a good friend. One of her good friends got married. I even talked to her about it. I was like, hey, I've got 6 months. I think I could drink. I'll just have a couple beers. And I had way more than that. Not enough to embarrass myself or black out, but more than I intended. But within 2 weeks, I was right back to where I left off.
Yeah, thanks for that, Thad. I just want to draw the listeners' attention to something Thad said, because I think it's really important. Teaching method here actually is when Thad said that he moved in with his future wife, and he would say, okay, I'm not going to drink anymore. And then he would drink. Okay, I'm not going to drink anymore. Okay. For all the men out there listening, when you do that in a relationship with another man or another woman, you are embodying a sense of like unpredictability and a nature that tells the person you're with, you cannot trust me. And then she will not feel safe. And it sounds like silly, but even just getting in the car, driving too fast, and your wife or your partner or your kids are saying you're over the speed limit, and you're like, yeah, it's okay. They're giving you signals that I need to feel safe with you. I need to trust you. And alcohol is one of those things where if we keep breaking our integrity, subconsciously the partner's just like, I can't trust this dude, right? So, that is going on in the background. You probably don't even know about it. Why I wanted to bring that to the fore. I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, and I would say that it extends even beyond our partners to our family. My brother, my parents, that they'd seen me make up excuses, and all my close friends in New York, everyone around me was like, "You got to get a handle on this," and I wanted to. I couldn't do it. I could, and I think. When alcohol or drug use gets to that point, it's a bomb that goes off in the community, people. And everyone who cares about you ultimately gets hurt. And sometimes that hurt is blatant, like the things I did to my then girlfriend. Like, you know, disappearing out of the bed in the middle of the night, going to drink all night, coming back drunk. Like that's distinct, right? Like there's a clear harm. But sometimes, which also happened with some of my other family members, it was just being inconsistent. Like they couldn't get a hold of me, or I was just absent, right? And not able to show up and be a supportive brother or son, you know? And those kinds of things, they're a harm too. And they all shake up people's trust. And so I think you're absolutely right. It can be rebuilt, but it takes time. It takes time. You know, the most effective thing I've found is living consistently well. You know, and it takes time. And you know, there's still color on my marriage today from that. You know.
I hear you. I definitely hear you on that. You know, one of the problems I had in the community I grew up is when people need help and support, they don't get it because all the people around them are also sucked into the same liquid lie, as I call it. So there's an incongruence I feel that the community feels subconsciously. They're not aware of it, but it prevents them from reaching out and saying, hey, dude, you got a problem and we can help you here, when they're actually mashing it just as much as the next guy, but it's not showing up too much as a problem in their life, right?
Correct. Yeah, it has to reach a certain pain threshold, a pretty significant one, because I agree with you. You know, alcohol is so interwoven into our culture, right? They've done a great job marketing their product. Like, are you happy? Have a drink. Are you sad? You need a drink. Are you bored? How about a drink? You know, it's like there's no state of being a human where it's not appropriate to have a drink according to their marketing. So I think you're absolutely right. It gets sold as this panacea that will, you know, heal all ills. And obviously it does the opposite. And I think you're exactly right, though, that, well, it's a hard thing to help someone with. First of all, they have to get over the hump and realize they have a problem in the first place. So in some ways, when it's not as intense as it was for me, I think it's almost trickier because people can still operate under the illusion that they can control it, or they'll find a solution where they can still drink the way they want to, but not have the effects they're having. You know, I lived in that delusion for a long time, despite a mountain of evidence to the contrary. So if it hadn't been so intense for me, I might still be drinking today, I think. So I think that's a difficult thing. And yes, you're right. It is also confronting for people sometimes, where for them to say that alcohol is a problem for you means they have to admit that alcohol might be a problem for them. And a lot of them do not want to do that. And then I think finally, you know, again, I would consider that I got to the point where I am very comfortable saying that I'm an alcoholic. Like, I think that is absolutely true. And I operate better accepting that as a truth, you know? So once it gets to that level, it's not a matter of choice anymore. And the thing is, you seem like a liar, but at the time I made the promises to not drink, I meant it. Like, I feel like you could have plugged me into a lie detector and I would have passed, because I believed I wasn't going to do it. And I really didn't want to do it. But when you're in that cycle and it's gotten to that point where you need it to numb a pain that you don't even know is there, that's just been simmering under the surface for probably most adults decades at that point, you just don't have a choice anymore. And so the other stigma you run into is people on the outside where it hasn't become a problem. They go like, well, if you're suffering all these bad consequences, why didn't you just stop? I would stop, and they would stop. But that doesn't work for us. We want to stop, we just can't. So we need some additional help as an exit ramp to get off of it, you know?
Totally. And your help came in the form of the 12 steps. I was interested when I was reading some of your work, you said a spiritual approach to the 12 steps. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, so that is what the 12 steps are. They are a spiritual solution. And it's interesting, you know, I think 12 steps in modern culture we see it in movies. The people in the meetings are sitting in a circle, and it looks in media more like group therapy. And it's not that there's an element of that that's present. The community aspect of 12-step is very important. But the thing that is the solution to the alcohol problem is going through the 12 steps, and they are unequivocally a spiritual solution. They're very clear about it. And basically, their premise is that sense of being separate and incomplete and not enough stems from a disconnection from some power that's greater than you. And 12 steps was created in the 1930s, so it does have kind of like a Christian vocabulary around it. They do talk about God a lot. My background is more Taoist. I used the Tao as my concept of a higher power, but I've known people to use the laws of physics or like the sun, or you could, quite frankly, it's arbitrary. As long as you don't think you're God, you're moving in the right direction. But you need to have some connection with a power greater than yourself. And that power has a couple things that have to be true about it that is still quite open. Number one, can't be human. So you can't make that power. I couldn't have made that power my girlfriend, my partner, my therapist, my mom, even my teacher in Bagua. And I tried kind of all of those things to be like, maybe if I just do what this person tells me and I just give all my agency over to them, it'll work. Never worked. Can't be human, and it has to be loving. So whatever that higher power is needs to have your best interest at heart and have your back. And so that as you connect with that higher power and start to trust your relationship with it and the direction you feel as you cultivate a relationship with that, you have to trust that it's going to take care of you, and it'll be able to relieve you of the urge to drink. And when it works, man, it works great. And obviously no approach is perfect. 12-step does not have a perfect success rate. I don't know of anything that does, because I think alcohol and drug addiction is just so tricky. It's, those of us that make it into sobriety are the lucky exceptions. So however people get there, I'm all for it. I think it's a great thing. If people need it, whatever way they get there is great. But when the 12 steps work, and frankly, doing the 12 steps even imperfectly is almost always functional. The people that it doesn't work for peter out partway through the steps for various reasons. It's scary. You got to look at all your stuff. You got to take responsibility for all your actions. You got to make amends. It's not fun. Nobody wants to do those things. You may have to cultivate a relationship with God, and something that you were, I actually went into 12-step 6 years before it worked for me. A friend of mine brought me to a Marijuana Anonymous meeting, and two things drove me out of it. One, all the God talk. I was like, no way. What is that? I'm not into this. Like, I don't want, it's not my thing. Good for you guys. I'm not interested. And number two, there's a lot of talk about surrender, right? Like this idea that you have to admit you're powerless and trust in this higher power to lead you out of this mess that you're in. And that just did not compute for me. I was like, what? I'm powerless? No, I got this. I just have to work harder. I'm going to be the one to fix it. And for me, that just turned the screws tighter. It spiraled me further downward. So for the people that it works for, and when they go through the steps, it just takes the urge to drink away. It's not permanent. You can't do the steps once and never. It requires maintenance of regularly looking at, where have I been selfish? How have I gotten resentful? What fears are popping up? What do I need to make amends for that I've done recently? How can I be more loving, helpful, and kind to the world around me? You have to grow in those areas. But if you do, I haven't really had an urge to drink in 6.5 years, and maybe 6 years and 3 months. It maybe took a couple months of being in 12-step before it hit. But my wife drinks. There's usually alcohol in the house. She doesn't drink a lot. She doesn't have my problem. She could throw half a glass of wine away. Even now, I look at it, I'm like, God, I would never do that. But I can be around it, and it's not a problem. if I have a good connection with this thing that feeds that part of me that was always lacking, then being around the alcohol is not a problem, you know? So yeah, that's a long answer to that question. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. I mean, what I would say to people out there, I actually get a lot of people coming into Strive who don't jive with Alcoholics Anonymous or get scared of the stigma or whatever.
Yeah.
What I would say to people listening to this who are like, don't like Alcoholics Anonymous, like Thad said, there are so many different ways to overcome what I call alcohol reliance that I would just say go. Like there's a member of our community at the moment called Alan, because we're very digital. And Alan, he's doing his thing physical, right? Like he said, he still loves to be, he's a part of the digital community. We've really helped him develop and grow to a certain level. But the next level for him is he needs to do things physically with people who get him and see him. He needs to talk to them. He needs to share with them. So he's doing all that stuff physically. I don't know if he's doing AA or he's found another way around that. But I would say to people listening, try everything. In-person meetings is probably the easiest way for you to start because there's no financial barrier. There's no problem because there'll be one on your doorstep somewhere. So just go. What usually happens in life, for me anyway, is every problem, let's use alcohol reliance as a problem at the moment, the solution usually comes from a variety of different sources, leaders, mentors, and inspirational figures. And you take a little bit of everything. So today, listening to this, somebody will take a little bit of nugget from what you talk about and they'll incorporate that into what they're going to do. So I just told my wife Liza, interviewing you today, and she's like, oh my God, I've been looking for a Qigong class. And I said, when you get one, sign me up, because I really believe I got an intuitive hit that something around that I call it's work, something around that work I'm going to use is going to help me to live a more self-led life. But it won't be that alone. It will be that and a myriad of other things I picked up over decades and decades and decades, right? So yeah, if you're worried about AA, go check it out. Usually your resistance is a mirror and it's showing you something you need to work on. So that in itself is not a bad thing. You have been training in the martial arts since early 90s. You talked about actually martial arts came before drinking. What was it that drew you to martial arts other than me like watching Bruce Lee movies? Maybe it was.
Yeah, that was part of the influence, to be honest. I'd say kung fu movies that had an effect. I was always curious about martial arts. It'd been kind of on my radar for a little while. I'm also half Chinese, so my dad's Chinese, and it struck me as a way to like reconnect with that culture a little bit, So there's that, but I just kind of always had a curiosity to do it, when I was younger, and then actually what led to me actually finally pulling the trigger was I tried out for the high school soccer team as a sophomore and totally didn't make it, and I was like, well, I'll go try a martial art, and it's not very exciting. I found a school in the Yellow Pages, which dates my experience a little bit, but I found a school at the Yellow Pages and then just went and started training and loved it. Right away found that I loved both doing and teaching it. So within probably a year, I was helping to assist classes, and that was my entry, and it was great. I think I had the makeup that I could have gone off the rails earlier. And I'm kind of grateful actually that it took me until my late 20s, early 30s to do it. Cause I think it developmentally, it has a big effect on you. It's not good at any time, but I think, at least by the time I got really into it, my brain was mostly developed, so there's that. So, but, it also led me down this pathway of discovering like the way that it feels like I'm most meant to help other people. So I'm grateful.
And on the helping other people, you talk about internal martial arts a lot, and I pulled a quote about using it to get closer to the expression of your true self. Yes. And the work that I do is I help people to live a self-led life alcohol free as fuck. And so it's like,
A very catchy slogan.
yeah, our use of and understanding of self may be different. I don't think that matters, but I'm really interested in what does the process look like for you and your clients to use martial arts as a way for them to tap into their self.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I also did a little look at your stuff. It looks great. Are you referring to self as kind of like the internal family systems, capital S self?
Yeah. So do you know? So just to go backwards a little bit, when you said how the 12 steps helped you to find a higher power.
Yes.
So I've done a lot of thinking, reflection for decades on this, and where I've landed right now, and what I'm teaching people, I actually found my higher power within myself.
Yes, correct.
So I found that I already had all the answers. I already knew how to be alcohol free as fuck, all within myself, a part of my personality and internal family systems therapy, which I know as self. And the reason I was drinking is I had a lot of these wounded parts that were not being feeling seen, heard, or that they mattered. And they were using alcohol and other things as a way to get attention. So for me, what I found is when I became alcohol free as fuck, I often say this a lot, I did it to save my first marriage. It didn't work. I got remarried, and then my second wife asked me for a divorce. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm the perfect human being. I don't drink no more. I'm like super zen, like what the fuck? And then I realized that she said, actually, I'm fed up of being in a relationship with a boy. And that's when I realized that for me, becoming alcohol free is not the end of something, it's the beginning of something. So I'm always saying to people, okay, so now we're going to help you to stop drinking, but then we're going to help you to live the most majestic life. And this is where I feel an area that's missing from my life is martial arts and everything that can teach me. So that's a little kind of like nutshell of where I am on that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I mean, to me, it sounds very congruent with my approach, which is with both 12 steps and internal arts. And 12 steps, I think we would say a similar thing where like, it turns out alcohol wasn't the problem. Alcohol was the solution to the problem. But for years and partly because again, everyone around us says like, you have to stop drinking, you have to stop drinking, you have to stop. So of course we think, well, if I just stop drinking, it'll all be good, right? No. Now you're left with your problem and no solution. Many people become more irritating to be around when they're not drinking and not working on themselves, right? We call it dry drunk in 12 steps, right? But anyway, so I totally identify with that. It's absolutely true. So similarly, from the 12-step approach, the goal is not just physical abstinence, it's to become happily sober, right? And you can't do that if you don't address all those things that you're talking about, one way or another, right? So anyway, internal arts, I think, is an excellent tool to complement that. I would agree, in my experience, though, for me, it wasn't enough by itself. I was already teaching before I got sober. And so, I practiced a lot, I was heavily involved in that practice before. And for me, it wasn't sufficient just in that way. I needed 12-step to complement it. But once I had sobriety as like a keystone, man, it like amplified my whole experience in the internal arts. So what I think is the way something like internal arts, whether it's Qigong, so internal arts is a Chinese way of describing a section of the martial arts training that is more what we would think of as internal in nature. So in Chinese martial arts, you could say something's external, internal. Something like Muay Thai is a good example of external martial arts out there in the world. So, or like harder Chinese styles like Shaolin is the classic external style that everyone would know. So that's like, you do your calisthenics and your punches and your kicks and we hit and we hard, and it's basically developing skill from the outside in. So I'm going to start with like a lot of hard conditioning, and then over time, hopefully, it will refine down and become more efficient and relaxed, but maintain the power. So that's sort of the external pathway. The internal pathway is opposite. We build from the inside out. So at the beginning, there's a lot of like slow, repetitive movements, standing meditation, things that don't look like martial arts on the outside because you're trying to build something on the inside first. And then over time that fills to the outside. And then it eventually does create more functional power, but one that's not as reliant on tight musculature in a sense. But the internal approach you kind of can't do without settling your spirit, right? So, I mean, well, I would argue that that's true. Maybe other people might think differently. So all internal arts are said to cultivate the 3 pillars, regardless of what style they are. They should, any well-designed internal arts method will do all 3 of these things. One is cultivate health and longevity. This is, in Chinese, they call this yang sheng, like the life nourishing practices. And so these are practices that basically integrate your body. They help heal old injuries. It regulates the flow of qi, blood, and fluids through your system. It's almost like the practice every day gives you like a little acupuncture treatment, kind of. It does what an acupuncture treatment would do to some degree, maybe not as intense, but it's the same rough effect. But a little bit over time regularly. And then this helps gently maintain your health and longevity over time. The second pillar is martial skill. So if it's an internal martial art, it needs to develop martial skill to some degree. And essentially, though, we can think of this as just resilience. So martial skill is the ability to maintain a connected, calm state under pressure. And the most extreme expression of that pressure is physical violence. So it's been tested by me and generations of other practitioners to work up to that level. So the principles, if they're well trained enough, can serve you well all the way to like what we think of as a martial application, true fighting, combat. But luckily, you don't have to get to that expert level to see a lot of benefit. It really will help give you almost what feels like an effortless resilience. I mean, there's effort involved in practicing, but then when you meet the challenge, it doesn't feel like, again, you have to like fight against it necessarily. There's a natural resilience comes out where you can maintain a connected state under pressure. And that pressure might just be, I lived and trained a lot of years in New York City. I found that some of it was just like, it changed the way I moved through the busy streets of New York. I was more aware of traffic and people and that kind of thing. That pressure might be an emotional conversation with a friend or a partner. It might be an intense scenario at work. It's anything that threatens to knock you off your base, right? And whether that's emotional or mental or physical, to us, it's all expressions of the same thing. And your practice it comes into play when needed. It like the pressure sparks it. Sometimes you don't even know it's going to be there until you get the input that makes it come out. So that's the martial skill element. And then the last bit is spiritual awakening. So, it was used by Taoists as a partner tool for their spiritual practices. And so there's an element of that aesthetic left in the way that the spiritual aspect goes. And that is essentially to reconnect with the Tao and learn how to live life in a state of what they call Wu Wei. So Wu Wei translates as effortless action, is maybe my favorite translation of it. Sometimes it gets translated as non-action or non-interference. That's all true to some degree. Wei in Chinese is part of the word wei shema, which means why. Wei shema is like what purpose. So wei is almost kind of leans purpose. So essentially, and wu means the lack of or like the absence of. So wu wei means the absence of a distinct purpose, meaning, and I think to Western ears, this can be a little frightening, like, but my goals define me, like I gotta have the things I'm shooting for. And yeah, they are functional and useful to a certain degree, but the Taoists would argue that when you deflate your ego enough that you can connect with the Tao, then you will start to naturally harmonize with the same flow that powers the rising and setting of the sun and the changing of the seasons and the birth and death of humans and the growth of an embryo and all that unseen force behind all those things. It has your interest at heart. It wants to grow you like a garden. But if we go in and we'll be like, but I need to go this way because I really wanted to do it, then we start to get off the path and get out of balance, and then we overcome. And And it's this fight against this natural flow. So if we can let go of the fight, and that's what the Wu Wei is like, we let go of what we think the purpose is, and we embrace this idea that like, all right, the Tao's taking me somewhere that's good. It's going to give my life meaning and purpose, and it's going to allow me to be helpful to others in a unique way if I just let go and I trust it and I go with that flow. And so it is active. It's not lethargy on the couch, right? This surrender is not it's not stagnant, right? Because that still counts as an action. That's actively not doing anything. And this also would not be healthy. So like a classical description of the state of Wu Wei that is really helpful is they say that when you're in Wu Wei, you don't do anything, but nothing gets left undone. So it's this idea where like it carries you through, very similar to the way we drive a car, right? We're not thinking, I gotta shift the shifter here and da, da, da. No, we just like, we know where we're going and boop, we go and everything takes care of itself. This incredibly complex series of movements and actions, they just string themselves together naturally. Well, the Taoists would say everything is going to work that way, right? You know, frankly, like a baby being grown inside a human, right? Like we don't do anything to make that baby grow, and yet it gets perfectly organized, exactly right. So that force is always available, right? And in fact, it only seems unavailable when we disconnect from it with our mind, but it's always there whether we know it's there or not. And we can fight against it as a reality and suffer, or we can align with it humbly and thrive. And that's when they talk about spiritual awakening, that's what they mean, is more and more getting to connect with the Tao and connect with the part of and here's actually, this is very parallel to what you were saying. The way we do it is it's not something outside of us. It's not a dude, it's not some bearded dude in the clouds, way distant, judging us. It's not that at all. When we connect to the Tao, there's only one direction you can go to fully connect with the Tao: in. That's why it's an internal art. Because if we try and do it based on anything external, even spiritual, I'm going to follow the exact method of this Taoist guru. Nope, you're externally attached, let alone if I just made enough money, or I just had the right girlfriend, or I just was famous enough, if I had enough followers, if I had enough likes, if I did anything outside of yourself, if you try and connect that way, it will ultimately be unsatisfying and you're going to suffer. The only way to get to it is in. You got to go in. And Taoism is very much about we accept everything. We aim towards non-judgment. We don't categorize anything as absolutely good or bad. We might experience it as pleasant or unpleasant. That's fair, but let's not confuse unpleasant with us as absolutely bad, right? And so the way that we get in, actually, we've been given a custom-tailored map to get back to the Tao. And it is revealed through our experiences, both positive and both comfortable and uncomfortable. So all these issues we've been given that drove us to drink, those aren't a burden. Those aren't some malevolent force coming in from the outside. Nope. That's the trail of breadcrumbs back to the Tao. But to do it, we've got to face our own inner dragons, the parts of ourselves we least want to look at and get honest about. We have to do that. And if we don't, it'll pop up over here and it'll pop up over there. And it will lovingly and generously keep saying like, hey, you didn't pay attention to me yet. Hey, and it'll get louder and louder the further we ignore it until we finally go, I give up. Fine. I won't fight it. What are you trying to tell me? Oh, okay. When I get fearful in this way, I get really selfish and I end up hurting the people around. Oh, I see. Okay. You know, it's never as bad as we think it's going to be. You know, but we have to follow that. And some of that also, it's not all that. Some of that is also what we think of as like following your passion, right? That inner sense of excitement when you find the thing that you love, which is really, that's the answer of what drew me to martial arts. There's all this outside stuff I could say, but it was just right because it was right. And I can't explain it much better than that. It's me. It's just, it always has been. And we can follow that too. And that will also lead us back to the Tao. But it all will. We don't get to pick and choose. I only want the parts that feel good. We got to accept it all and follow it inward and it will inevitably lead us back to that place. And no matter how little progress we make back towards that place, it feels good. Luckily, we don't have to finish it. We don't have to become, in Taoism, the highest level they call immortal. So we don't have to become enlightened immortals to experience the benefits. We could just be 1 millimeter closer to the Tao, and it feels relieving. We get more peace, we get more clarity, we get more sense of purpose and connection. Every little increment of movement back to the Tao feels not good, right? I don't want to say good because it's not that it's always pleasant, but it feels right. So.
Thank you for that, Thad. I can feel the passion. I can feel the passion, and that's really important, you know. I get a lot of clients, myself included, was very much like this, and I'm still like this sometimes, where they spend a lot of time in their head.
Yes.
I actually remember when I was doing my Elementum life coach training, the coaches kept saying to me, "Lee, get out of your head," and I was getting so fucking angry with them because I didn't know how to get out of the head, so I didn't understand the question. So I get a lot of people coming to me, they're in their head,
Yep.
and they can't get into their body, so they can't feel, they can't slow down, they can't calm. There's always an answer, there's always a something, there's always a structure, blah 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 blah. If somebody like that came to your clinic or your class,
Yep.
where do you start with trying to get them out of their head? I mean, the Tao's everywhere, right? But you get what I'm saying, right? Like,
totally, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that telling someone who's in their head to get out of their head is the equivalent of, well, it's like telling someone who has a drinking problem, just don't drink. Or someone who's depressed, like, just get out of bed and exercise every day and eat well. I don't see what the problem is. Like, no. Or, for example, tell your pissed off partner, just calm down. How well does that work? Does that get people calm? No way, you know? Doesn't work on me. It definitely does not work on my wife either. But yeah, it's a difficult thing. So I think it is helpful to have an entry point. And so for me, what I've discovered, and of course, as you said, it is everywhere. So there's not just one right way to do this. But I take one of the core principles that is present in both the healing aspects of what we do as practitioners and for sure in all the practices like the internal arts, and I give it to people right away. And this principle is called mind settles to open Mingman, is how we talk about it. This is the equivalent also, some internal arts systems will say call it focus to Dantian. Dantian and Mingman are two terms for the same central space in the body. It's located in the lower torso. So Dantian is referring to one aspect of that space that is below the navel and behind, deep inside the abdomen. Mingman refers to space that is more at the level of the navel or the middle of the lower back in front of the spine. But you could we in our system think of this as two facets of the same gem. So it's like, which side of the space are you paying attention to? And in our lineage, there seems to be a particular benefit to focusing on the back one first, Mingman. Mingman translates as the life gate. And so if I have someone on the table for the first time, they'll almost always get talked through focusing to Mingman a little bit while I unwind parts of their body. And for sure, if they're our basic way of just starting, like our most fundamental practice is a standing meditation practice. And the most basic, but not, well, the simplest, but not it's the simplest, but potentially the most profound way is to just stand and focus to Mingman. And so people are going to get exposed to this no matter what. And so I think that this is a little bit more helpful. So say you feel like your attention is in your head and you can feel your thoughts racing and you know you're there. So it requires just that base level of awareness of saying like, oh, I can tell I've got whatever my flag is that lets me know I'm in my head. 12 Steps has a really useful thing for this. They say restless, irritable, and discontented. So if you're any of those things, you know you're trapped in self, and that's gonna be involved being stuck in your head. So without exception, anytime you feel those feelings, that's where you are. And someone may or may not have done something concrete to help encourage you into that state. But once you're in that state, that's your responsibility, you know? And so that's another good gauge. But whatever your flag is, as long as you have that where you know, like, oh, I've tipped the scales, or I'm getting anxious, whatever it is, you don't try and change it. This is the Wu Wei thing. I'm not going to go like, okay, stop thinking anxious thoughts. We accept it. Okay. Anxiety's here. This is my cue to come back to that central space. I'm just going to let anxiety run. And anxiety's going, fine. Anxiety's going. But what's happening in that space? And I want to tune in with that space with a quality of listening. So in Chinese, as you develop sensitivity through the training, which gets better and better over time, they call that ability tingli, which is listening skill. So this is a hint that the way that we sense into these areas of the body is listening. Something like a visualization can help. Some systems use it there, but you don't need it. You just need some way to bring your attention or your awareness into that space. So oftentimes what I'll encourage people to do is just ask themselves a question about it. Like something's going on and it's like, okay, what's the texture of that space? And it's the whole three-dimensional ball-like space behind the navel and in front of the spine. What does the texture of that space feel like over time as I watch it? And racing thoughts can race. Just let them do whatever they want to do. But what's happening there? I mean, everything else gets to operate in the background. I'm not pushing any of it away. I'm just trying to get the spotlight of my attention into that space. What's going on there? What can I just feel as I pause and listen to that space? And this will gently get you out of your head every time. It does many things. Being centered in that place is one of the primary ways that we express functional martial arts power. All of our movements need to source from that place. It's not exactly like using your core. It's the thing that is initiating the movement is non-muscular, but it moves through the musculature. So it involves your biomechanics, but it is not at root biomechanical. It's something else. That's why we think of it as a space, an all-inclusive space. So that's going to include the organ tissues that are there, the blood vessels, the meridians, the chi blood and fluids flowing through all those vessels, even the space, the interstitial space between the structures of the organs, all inclusively, everything in that space. Can I just feel that space? And we describe this as mind settling to open Mingman as a cue to what will happen, which is a sense of opening if we put our awareness there. So awareness there is like a catalyst that sparks eventually a very tangible sense of inflating in that space. And this has all kinds of different effects on the body. From a Chinese medicine perspective, we would say that this allows heart fire to descend. Heart fire is closely associated with the spirit, so I'm going to go a little off here. But basically, it will be calming without you having to force yourself to calm down. So from a Chinese medicine perspective, we see this as physiologically calming. When that space opens up, it's like a comfy chair that heart fire wants to come down to, and so it'll descend. It also allows a collection of the different energies of the body that we call true qi, which is this form of qi that gets cultivated through practice to gather in that place, like the way that fluid would gather in a valley between mountains. So dantian, the other term for that, is elixir field. And that's the elixir that they're referring to is this potent vital energy that begins to tangibly gather there in a way that fills that opening. And so all of these things aid in getting you out of your head, getting you into your body. One reason I have people do that on the table too, and oftentimes it's with sort of gentler, more unwinding work, their body immediately responds much more quickly. Sometimes they don't always feel it right away because it's a little subtle. Usually people are just like, oh, that's kind of relaxing, but I can feel it right away. As soon as they start focusing to Mingman, the thing that didn't want to let go goes, oh, okay, I can let go a little bit more, maybe not perfectly, but it's so consistent every time. So it does this whether someone's treating you or not. If you put your awareness there, it has a universally opening and integrating effect. That's why we always want to feel like we're moving from there, because if we just even if we're not forcing it or we're not even sure we're doing it right, but we're just listening for what is there that could be the source of my movements, you will automatically begin to move with more integration and power. It's very tangible. So to me, that's a very concrete, simple one that that's my constant preach. No one leaves their first session with me without knowing that one thing.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I want a piece of that," how does it manifest itself in the what's the change? Like, how do they slowly start to feel and think differently and move differently throughout the world? What are some of the things that happen in the world that are slowing them down that suddenly don't happen, or they develop greater tools or wisdom? Like, what's going on there?
A great question. So, again, I'm kind of fully bought into the internal approach, right? 12 steps I think of as just, it's internal arts under a different name. They just didn't call it that, right? So I'm sold. So I think that generally what happens more than circumstances change eventually, experience changes immediately. So when we shift that thing that's inside of us, and I think that the sensitivity as listening is a good clue. So generally, for most adults in the Western world, we want to shift out of self-will and towards following the Tao. Self-will is the ego-driven, I know what's best for me and I know how to get it and I'm going to make it happen and I'm going to turn all the dials and pull all the levers the way I know how to do it so I can get what I want, right? In an extreme expression, that's what self-will is. And whereas, again, the following the Tao is like, I'm compelled to go over here. I'm not sure why. I'm like the janitor here, right? I get told to go over there. I'm the spiritual janitor. I show up. I mop the floor I got told to mop. Oh, look, I feel better. Oh, and then there's something else, right? Like it's we get the next step. We're not in management anymore, right? We are agents in the field. And so we receive guidance and direction. And so our movement, being in the West, which encourages a lot of that self-will, is going to seem like a shift out of I'm leading the way to I'm following, or I'm telling the world what I'm going to get to I'm listening to where the world is taking me. So it's a little bit of a shift towards the more passive. It is not ultimately passive. It's just that the balance point for most people that have grown up in Western culture is relatively more passive than the standard, is what I'd say. Eventually, as we said, it should create a state where you don't do anything but nothing gets left undone. So that means I find I'm more active actually when I do it. It's just I'm not fighting. I have more acceptance of like, okay, this is the thing that needs my attention. It clearly does, Okay, I'll give that my attention and that's the thing that I'm going to take care of. And maybe that thing that I thought was on my to-do list is going to have to wait till tomorrow, and we're flexible. We want to be open and flexible.
And give you an example, interject and give an example there, see if it ties in. So many years ago, I can't tell you how many years ago, I'm a little bit of a to-do list guy, right? Like I'm a structure, like a Stephen Kessler, he has the 5 personality patterns, and he's been a guest on this show, and I find an affinity to the rigid pattern that shows up for me sometimes. And I remember when I was really, I become alcohol free as fuck, and I was really trying to like live more consciously. And on my to-do list was like, I'm going to join a Qigong class, right? So I ended up at this Qigong class, and it was me and 5 women. I don't think any of them were under 80, right? And I remember like doing these motions in the first session, and then the guy asking if we all wanted to rest, and I'm like, we haven't done anything, right? Like my head's like, we haven't done anything. Anyway, I went back, and then after a while, I thought, oh, this isn't doing nothing. I'm going to leave, right? So I left. Okay, this was like many years ago. Today, my observation of myself and where I can develop more is that I'm always rushing. I'm always on to the next thing. I'm always wanting to do something. So now all of a sudden I look back at my experience of Qigong and I think to myself, that is exactly what I needed, but I didn't even know I needed it. And so actually for me now, I want something that slows me down. And as I'm hearing you talk, that's what I'm saying to myself. I'm saying to myself, oh, he's talking about slow down, stop doing stuff and just be human.
Correct.
Or is that I wanted to throw that out there. Yeah.
100% are exactly right.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that again, so in essence, everything we do is about a movement towards balance. So if someone was the opposite of you and they tended towards lethargy, it was really hard for them to get up and get going. They're going to have to be a little bit at the uncomfortable edge of doing a little more than they think they want to. Someone like you that's maybe more of a doer, you actually, and this is hard because unfortunately your imbalance is strongly supported by all of society. Look at you picking yourself up by the bootstraps. Oh, he's such a hard worker. He's hustling, like there's a lot of kind of cultural support for your imbalance. So it's especially hard to get out of, but your edge involves uncomfortably in the realm of like, you should be in a place where you're like, I think I'm not doing enough. and that's going to move you towards balance, but absolutely. I think for most people in the Western world, it is over time, it becomes this transition from doing to being. That's exactly right. And
can I ask you something on that again? Sorry, I know I'm jumping in here.
No, I love it.
I want to talk about the transition from doing to being, because what you were saying then, society is rigged for me to keep doing.
Correct.
In the moments in my life where I'm pretty nailing it, I'm just being careful of my words here because I know my words don't even make sense. What I mean by nailing it, so let's say 1 week I'm in doing mode and I work 12 hours every day and I don't spend any time with my wife or my kids. And then the next week, I actually spend 3 hours working a day and I spend the rest of the time with my wife and my kids, right? I noticed that I do the latter, spend more time with my wife and kids, when I'm financially secure. When I'm not financially secure, I find myself at the grindstone working so hard, right? And what I find is when I'm in the space, I guess when I'm closer to the Tao, right? Beware, because this isn't my language, right? But
No,
when
I love it.
When I'm closer to the Tao, using a bit of internal family systems, my parts that want to do, they freak the fuck out.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden, everything is easy. And what I mean by that is clients come to me with ease. The sessions and the things they come at me with are easy. I find myself speaking to my coach saying, I don't understand it. This guy's paying me money to coach him and he's got nothing to work on. And she's saying, didn't you say you wanted money to just flow to you easily and naturally? And now you're fighting against it. So I'm curious, just before we let you go, because I know we're coming up to time.
That's okay.
How do you stay in that growth period where suddenly you're transitioning from doing to being? It's really, you're getting it, it's calm, it's quiet, but you feel so uncomfortable, and then you hijack it and you fuck it up and you go back rather than staying with it.
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, I don't have a perfect solution to that. I think that's the nature of the process. It's almost like, and I love I've done some internal family systems work myself and I love it. Yeah, this whole thing of like parts, I think it makes total sense. And especially one thing that I really love that I find quite Taoist is that we view all those parts as loving. They all have our best interest at heart. They're trying to help us the best way they know how. They're just confused about how to do it. And they're scared to let go because they literally think that if they're not running the ship their way, we will perish. So they're going to hold on for dear life that way. So, it is natural that maybe those parts would be willing to test it a little, right? They need a little bit of data over time is kind of what it seems like. They need to be shown it's not all going to fall apart, They need to know they're going to be included, right? So you moving on doesn't mean that you're trying to cut them out. No, you're trying to give them a well-deserved break, because if they're doing that, they're probably exhausted. They have been on, and most of these parts I think are quite young. So they're trying to execute a skill set way beyond their ability. And they've been clinging on for dear life for decades. They're tired. They would love the break. So like, if you can do this, if you can relate to those and those tangible flare-ups of like, oh, that thing came up again. Oh, okay. It's scared. Great. You're scared. I get it. Fine. Be scared. Like, I'm going to give you a moment. You learn how to relate to that in whatever way you do. Here's also a thing where, for me personally, I use the 12-step system. So I use prayer, and prayer is a major component of what we do. And it's nice because we have basic prayers for most of the things that come up. If you wanted one universal one, that could be to anything, again, the Tao, Buddha, Allah, doesn't matter what it is, but it is useful to, in some way, it's useful to point it at that higher power inward, right? It's a paradox where you aren't God, but God is in you. If that makes sense. So I think one generally useful one that can be quick and easy is, please free me from the bondage of self and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And that, for me, is like it's a quick path back to being. You'll notice it's not direct my attention to what you'd have me do. It's direct my attention to what you would have me be. And you might have to pause, but probably not that long. And then you listen, and then you're open to being guided. And then you do it. And it's that over and over and over again.
Thad, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you and your work today?
Yeah. So probably my website is the easiest place. It's www.martialwellness.net. Martial, like martial arts. I'm on Instagram, and I just opened like a YouTube and TikTok thing. I'm not as present on social media. It's in the works. I've got someone I'm starting to work with to put some content together, but my website's the best place. And that has all my contact info, and you can sign up for online classes and all that. Yeah.
Well, Thad, thank you very much for being a guest on the show. Keep doing that great work. I see loads of, for people listening, the internal martial arts, 12 steps, what we're doing here at Strive, internal family systems. Look, there's so much gold out there that you can just take the bits that work for you and all of them. Don't have to be rigid. You don't have to stick to one thing. Although sometimes it helps. But there's a lot of great people and a lot of great things out there. Have a wonderful day, Thad. Really appreciate it. And take care of yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.